morning, everybody. This is another edition of the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnKelly.com. By Two Ways, One Passion Food Truck, located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. Handful of topics we're going to get into today in the world of baseball, sports, and unifying America. And, you know, we're going to talk a little bit, give a little bit of a preview of the Daytona 500. I'll admit it's not 100% in my element, but I'm looking forward to it. So we'll have a couple minutes where we'll talk about that. Baseball Hall of Fame. There's a certain issue that I wanted to bring up. I did a little bit of research and I wanted to back up my argument. Today's not going to be so much bitching about the Hall of Fame as much as talking about the percentage of players and the greatness of the players that are in the Hall of Fame and those that were elected the first time on the ballot. Like I said, Daytona 500 we're going to talk about, but I'd be remiss if I didn't start the program today talking about the XFL. And as we're entering the second weekend of the second coming of the XFL, and I think there is some optimism that's out there that this league can serve over time as kind of a developmental league for the NFL, something that unfortunately hasn't existed too much. And you think of the likes of the USFL, which produced really some great players that ended up becoming integral parts of the National Football League, whether it's Doug Flutie, Warren Moon, Herschel Walker. Really since then, through the CFL, you know, the Canadian Football League, the Arena Football League, the first XFL, the Alliance of American Football, any other professional football league that's been put out there, it is almost been done in competition with the National Football League. And hopefully the lessons that were learned the last time the XFL went out there and failed, you know, can be learned this time around. And the one thing that you've seen over the first couple of weeks that has lacked on a serious matter is the play of the quarterback. Now we got to understand that when you're watching the XFL as opposed to watching the NFL, which, you know, NFL fans watch 17 weeks of the National Football League season, 3 rounds of playoffs and the Super Bowl, and we know that it's the highest level of competition that you're going to find in any sort of football. You know, you got college football, which, yeah, there's certain things that are great about it, but the talent, you know, players 1 through 53 or 1 through however many that exist on a college football team, it just don't match up to that of the National Football League and the quality of players there. And you have to understand, and I know some people will not understand because they will only accept the XFL if the competition is 100% on par of the National Football League, and it's just unfortunately never going to happen. But the one thing that you hope over time you could get a little bit of better play out of is the quarterback position. And it's hard. Because if you think of the National Football League, you know, there's 32 teams, and not all 32 teams in the National Football League have a quality starting quarterback. Some of them are kind of back and forth between 2 average to slightly below average candidates. And if you look at the top 10, you know, where did you see anything really dropping off? I mean, guys like Tom Brady and Phillip Rivers and, you know, Ben Roethlisberger was injured last year. Eli Manning lost his starting quarterback job. So there's a lot of transition going on in the National Football League, and the emergence of the next generation of top quarterbacks. You know, you've seen a lot of very good quarterbacks kind of fade away, and even though some of them are still starters, they're not the same type of player they were during their best. And then you're just not seeing a lot of young talent. I mean, there's Deshaun Watson, there's Pat Mahomes, there's, you know, a couple other young quarterbacks. Russell Wilson's not that young anymore, that have kind of taken the next step. But you're waiting on Sam Darnold. Josh Rosen looks like he might not work out at all. Josh Allen with the Buffalo Bills. Baker Mayfield had a bad season last year. And you think of guys like Mitch Trubisky, who's taken 2nd overall by the Chicago Bears, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston. You know, those guys have not necessarily gotten themselves to the next level. So even on the NFL level, it's hard to name a quality quarterback that is in the position to start for every given team. So you add 8 more teams when we're talking about the XFL, and to find guys on the street or maybe quarterbacks that were overlooked, whether it's through college, whether they missed out on the draft, whether they were maybe battling for a third string job with a National Football League team and ended up not getting it. And you start to understand why some of the quarterbacks are not in the National Football League. Now, Cardell Jones was okay. He looked good. He led his DC team to a victory. They're 2-0. They look like they're the best team in this league. But, you know, there's flaws in Cardell Jones's game. And he looks like probably, at this point, the best quarterback that we've seen in the XFL. You got a guy like Matt McGloin playing for the New York team. Looked all right in the first week. Looked absolutely dreadful in a game in the second week of the XFL season. Now, does that mean that he's more the quarterback we saw in week 2 than week 1? No. I mean, maybe he's a little bit better, but in all seriousness, he didn't look like he belonged on the field. He didn't look like he's a guy that should have ever taken a snap in a National Football League game. And, you know, the worst part about it, and I think the XFL is trying really hard to gain new fans, to create a good image, to draw a little drama. I do believe there was something to the LA team firing their defensive coordinator after one game, which I thought was a big, negative mark on the progress of Pepper Johnson. Pepper Johnson's probably trying to get a job on an NFL coaching staff and maybe somewhere down the road be a defensive coordinator, and maybe to create a little drama. I don't know if Vince McMahon has anything to do with this, but, you know, to create a little extra drama, he fires the defensive coordinator after the first week, basically putting Pepper Johnson in a tough position to get a legitimate job in the National Football League down the road. Now, the other thing you saw was, I don't know if it's a pressure from the press. I don't know if it's the XFL encouraging the players to say what they want, but Matt McGloin, when he's at halftime, basically criticizing his coaching staff, basically criticizing the players that are around him. And I tell you, if I'm not inspired by what I'm seeing on the field with this guy as a quarterback and as a quarterback option down the road, the thing that I hope we could be all right with is the guy's attitude and his accountability and his understanding of his role as a quarterback. If you're a quarterback, you're the general. You're the leader of the household. You are the number one person. Everything's got to go through you. You're the coach on the field. So when you play horrible, which he did, and then you go out there and it seems like you're blaming everybody else but yourself, you're an embarrassment to the sport, not just the XFL, but all of professional football. And I would hope next week that Matt McGloin has somebody in his ear that says that, you know what, your play, if it sucks, it sucks. There's nothing you can do about that. You could play better, you could try to play better, but if you're not that good, that you are what you are. But if you act like a jerk, and you seem like you're blaming your teammates, you seem like you're blaming your coaching staff, you're telling your team that you need to have a whole new game plan, basically embarrassing your coach, basically undermining your coach. It's something that's unacceptable. And Matt McGloin, if he loses his job as an XFL quarterback for his play, he may have a chance to compete in training camp with an NFL team next year. But if he loses his job as an XFL quarterback because of his attitude, then he's never going to play professional football again. So we got the 62nd running of the Daytona 500 coming. And, you know, it's an exciting moment for a couple different reasons, because you think of all of professional sports, and usually they have what you call a culmination of its season in a championship game form. And obviously I'm talking about something like the Super Bowl or the NBA championship or the World Series or the Stanley Cup finals. You know, you have a season that goes on, and what does it culminate? It culminates with the sharing of whoever the new champion is, whether it's a repeat champion, whether it's somebody that's a champion for the first time. It's almost like the Queen or the Miss America pageant. You know, the person being crowned, the woman being crowned at the end, saying, here you are, Miss America. But what is weird about NASCAR is the Daytona 500 kicks off the season, but that is like the equivalent of its Super Bowl. It's the biggest event of NASCAR, but it starts out the season. And, you know, this is a 60-second time that you've seen this race be run. And the first one, of course, was 1959 when Richard Petty's father, Lee Petty, won the inaugural one. And you think of the racing fans and the NASCAR fans throughout the world, they're excited. They're probably as passionate, if not more passionate, than football fans or baseball fans or fans of any other sport. And they're flocking the outskirts of Florida and Daytona Beach to watch the kicking off of NASCAR season. And, you know, a couple things that I'm looking for. It's going to be very interesting. It looks like Jimmie Johnson, a Hall of Fame type of driver, is running a race for the last time. He's won it twice, if I'm not mistaken. It's 2006 and 2013. Be nice to see him win it a third time. Last year's winner, Dennt Hamlin, won a race twice. So it'd be nice to see him win it a third time. And if I'm not mistaken, looking through the whole field, I don't see anybody else that's in a position that could win the race for the third time. Richard Petty has the most Daytona 500 victories with 7. Cale Yarborough has won the race 4 times. Dale Jarrett, Jeff Gordon, Bobby Allison have won the race 3 times. And 2-time winners outside of Hamlin and Johnson include Bill Elliott, Sterling Marlin, Michael Waltrip, Matt Kenseth, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Now, what I find fascinating, because I've just mentioned about how the Daytona 500 is like the Super Bowl of NASCAR, but starts the racing season. There have been a total of 5 different drivers, a total of 6, 7, 8, 9 different times that have won the Daytona 500 and won the NASCAR Cup Championship. And that was Lee Petty in 1959, his son, the legendary Richard Petty, in 1964, 1971, 1974, and 1979. Cale Yarborough in 1977, Jeff Gordon in 1997, and Jimmie Johnson in 2006 and 2013. So you think of some of the racers that are out there, the field, and of course, you know, it'd be nice if I could pull the field up. But there's definitely some interesting things. You think of the great veteran racers, and, you know, a guy like Kurt Busch, you know, Kevin Harvick, who you've seen in a mix in a lot of different major races. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who looked like he was in a pole position a couple weeks ago. New Jersey's Martin Truex Jr. Trying to see any other names kind of stand out. You know, Chase Elliott of the great Elliott family, Ryan Newman, Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Casey Mears, you know, of course, of the great Mears family. So, you know, there is some, at least, lineage talent that's out there. And of course, you know, you think of the Bushes, you think of Hamlin, you think of Harvick, and Truex, as, you know, Joey Logano, certainly. So, you know, it's something to be interested. Obviously, you know, FanDuel and DraftKings, you can place some bets on a race. But I'll tell you, a great place to be at 2:30 Eastern would be watching the Daytona 500, really to kick it off of another great season. We got golf, which is kind of just kicking off. Hopefully the weather holds up. But you see the tournament this week is kind of the kickoff to, well, we'll get ready to see golf season. The majors will start coming up, I believe, in the month of April. You know, the NBA is sitting there in its All-Star weekend. And listen, I think they're always trying to do stuff to pump up the game. I think they're always putting stuff out there to try to draw some attention to the game. Stephen A. Smith and Michael Wilbon with celebrity teams. You know, Stephen A. Smith getting a technical foul. The dunk contest seemed like it was pretty interesting. You know, you see some really good athletes there. And then you'll see the All-Star game this Sunday. And probably a lot of points being scored. You got, obviously, the Team LeBron against Team Giannis. The All-Star Game MVP named after Kobe Bryant. And, of course, we've talked about his tragic passing, just untimely. You got the NBA announcing its finalist for the Hall of Fame. Great broadcaster, fantastic broadcaster, Mike Breen, getting in. Likely will be joined by guys like Kevin Garnett and Bryant and Tim Duncan, probably among others. One thing I've said about the National Basketball Association and its Hall of Fame is I think it is watered down up to a certain point. When we think of the greatness of a player like Kobe Bryant, certainly throw Tim Duncan in the mix, Kevin Garnett. You're talking about real Hall of Fame talented players. Bryant may go down as one of the best to ever play. But you look at the talent that is in the Hall of Fame, and there's a lot to be questioned. And I don't think it's fair for me to just call out a name or two. But I think there's very few Hall of Fames that, open the door up for a lot of players that, you quote the great Frank Robinson. He made a statement. He said that you know what, the Hall of Fame is not for really good players. It should be for the top 1% or the top 0.5%. And he was right about that. And Frank, had a tendency to come off as arrogant and as rough. A lot of the racial tension that he dealt with when he was growing up, you could tell kind of stood on the outside of his skin, and he wore it in his attitude and the way that he felt that he was burdened. But that was a statement that he made that was 100% right. You think in baseball, the likes of Harold Baines getting into the Hall of Fame, and it's a shame that Harold Baines has become the poster child to a Hall of Fame process which has veered from being kind of wavering, like you're talking about that driver that's kind of swerving a little bit, and then all of a sudden, when it came to the steroid guys and the decision made to hold these guys out, you veered off the road and hit a tree. But the aspect that I wanted to get into when it comes to the Hall of Fame is the discussion that was made about Derek Jeter. And Derek Jeter ended up being one vote short of being a unanimous selection. And it would have been the second straight year that a Hall of Fame player would have got in and gotten 100% of the vote. And I understand there's a lot of the fans of now and the media of now that don't understand why a player can't get 100% of the vote. Now, the voter that abstained from voting for Derek Jeter may have submitted a blank ballot, may have voted for other players, but chose to keep his name anonymous. But regardless of how you may feel about the man's decision, the person, or the woman, it could have been a woman, they had the right to vote as they would please. And there's a reason, actually a couple reasons, why the Baseball Hall of Fame has not had unanimous selections. It started early on in the process. It was kind of a trial by error thing when the Hall announced its first class of Hall of Famers in 1936. Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. And then players were selected in 1937 and 1938 and 1939. And then they got them all together in a ceremony and they started Cooperstown in New York. But what I have here is a list of every player that got into baseball's Hall of Fame or was selected in a baseball's Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Now, what stands out about this is if I don't mention their name right now, that means that they didn't get in on the first ballot at all. So forget about being unanimous. Forget about getting 100% of the vote. There's guys like, you think the likes of Joe DiMaggio, who didn't get in on the first ballot. You don't think Joe DiMaggio is a Hall of Famer? You don't think Joe DiMaggio is one of the top 20 offensive players of all time? Mel Ott, Jimmy Fox, Rogers Hornsby? Are you kidding me? They should be first ballot Hall of Famers. And with all due respect those players were better than Derek Jeter. And I know New York Yankee fans and baseball fans of the 1990s and 2000s love Jeter and respect what Jeter has done. Jeter was a great player. Jeter wasn't better than Ty Cobb. Jeter wasn't better than Babe Ruth. And some people say, well, the times have changed. Writers vote differently. How do you explain baseball writers, 4 of them, not voting for Ty Cobb his first year on the ballot? How do you explain voters, 11 of them, not voting for Babe Ruth his first time on the ballot? Honus Wagner was not voted for by 11 writers. Ted Williams was not voted for on his first year on the ballot by 20 writers. Bob Feller, 10. Al Kaline, 45. Hank Aaron, 9. Brooks Robinson, 30. Willie McCovey, 79. Johnny Bench, his first year on the ballot of eligibility, 16 writers didn't vote for him. Jim Palmer, 33. Rod Carew, 42. Reggie Jackson, 27 writers didn't vote for Reggie Jackson for the Hall of Fame his first year of eligibility. Mike Schmidt, 16. George Brett, 9. Dave Winfield, 80. Ozzie Smith, 39. Paul Molitor, 75. Wade Boggs, 42. Tony Gwynn, 13. Now, all these players were fortunate enough to get in on their first year of eligibility. But how do you explain all those writers? And listen, some cases were a little bit tougher. You know, there's a couple cases, there's a couple names that I'll throw out there that may not have been deserving necessarily to get in on the first year of their ballot, and they snuck in. But Stan Musial, is there any more of a rock solid, surefire Hall of Famer first ballot than Stan Musial? How do you explain 23 writers that didn't vote for him his first year of eligibility? Warren Spahn won, 370 games? 64 writers didn't vote for him his first year of eligibility. Mickey Mantle. Can you really make a case that Mickey Mantle is not a Hall of Famer? 64 baseball writers decided not to vote for Mickey Mantle his first year of eligibility. 62 writers didn't vote for Ernie Banks his first year of eligibility. Willie Mays, 23 writers didn't vote for Willie Mays the first year he was eligible. Bob Gibson, 63. Frank Robinson, 45. Lou Brock, 80. Willie Stargell, 75. Carl Yastrzemski, 24. Joe Morgan, 81. Tom Seaver, 5. Steve Carlton, 20. Nolan Ryan, 6. Robin Yount, 112. Kirby Puckett, 92. Eddie Murray, 73. Dennis Eckersley, 75. Cal Ripken, 8. Rickey Henderson. Now you think about Rickey Henderson, you may talk about Rickey Henderson, I don't know, you may have not cared for him if you wanted, if you're in the media. How do you explain Rickey Henderson, 3,000 hits, way more stolen bases than anybody in baseball history, the greatest leadoff hitter the sport has ever seen, played forever, and 28 baseball writers were trying to make a case that Rickey Henderson shouldn't get in on the first year of his eligibility. Greg Maddux, 16. Frank Thomas, 93. Tom Glavine, 46. Randy Johnson, 15. Pedro Martinez, 49. John Smoltz, 104. Ivan Rodriguez, 106. Ken Griffey Jr., 3. Chipper Jones, 12. Jim Thome, 43. Roy Halladay, 62. Leaving you with Derek Jeter, 1. and Mariano Rivera 0. Now, it doesn't mean that Mariano Rivera was the greatest baseball player ever. It doesn't mean that Derek Jeter was the second best player ever. It doesn't mean that Ken Griffey Jr. was the third best player ever. It doesn't mean Ty Cobb was fourth. We don't rank players based off of the amount of voters, baseball writers that voted for them their first year of eligibility. It's just not the way we roll. But when it comes to the Baseball Hall of Fame process, we put a lot of emphasis in how many writers choose to vote for somebody that first year. And I've said this has been a point that I made a couple times in the show. There actually is a legitimate reason that a baseball writer can leave a surefire, no doubt Hall of Fame candidate off of their selection of 10 players. Because the ballot at this point is still very stacked. There are still a lot of very good quality Hall of Fame caliber players that are on the ballot. You can make a case where you can vote for 10 players easily. Some of them have been gaining traction. You look at a guy like Scott Rowland and Omar Vizquel and Jeff Kent and Billy Wagner, Gary Sheffield, Sammy Sosa, Manny Ramirez. Somebody may feel that a vote for one of those players would be enough to build momentum for them getting in maybe in a couple years, or keeping them above the 5%, which we feel is pretty good. 5% is enough. It looks like any of those players that I mentioned should be getting over 5% of the total vote, but to get them on the ballot the next year. So if you're not voting, let's say, hypothetically, for a Derek Jeter, it's not a statement that Derek Jeter isn't a Hall of Famer. That vote that goes for another player could keep that player on the ballot for the next series of years. And, you could agree to disagree with that point, but I could see a writer actually voting that way. And once again, you're talking about a flawed process. So many different flaws of the Hall of Fame that I could do a show and probably be on 12 hours straight talking about all of the things that aren't right about the Baseball Hall of Fame and its process. But one of them, obviously, is this thought of perfection. This thought that somebody should get 100% of the vote. And Mariano Rivera, by getting 100% of the vote, doesn't make him any better than any player in baseball history. Doesn't mean he was the best at his position by a mile, because the role of the closer in Major League Baseball has changed over the years. Goose Gossage was not asked to do what Mariano Rivera was asked to do. Not to say that Goose Gossage could have done it. Goose Gossage may not have been good as that proverbial one-inning closer. Mariano Rivera, well, we'll never know if he could have been a 2-3 inning closer like Gossage and Bruce Sutter were, and Raleigh Fingers and Hoyt Wilhelm. And even Dan Quisenberry, who was on the outside looking in, I think is a legitimate Hall of Famer. Hopefully down the road he'll get his due. But I think of Babe Ruth and the 11 writers that chose not to vote for Babe Ruth in the Baseball's Hall of Fame. I think we should talk more about them than the one that didn't vote for Derek Jeter. Who would you rather have? We're talking about best baseball player of all time. If you'd rather have Jeter than Ruth, then I think you're a little bit biased. A little bit of a recap of the show today, and as always, I do want to thank everybody for tuning in. We talked a little bit about the XFL and the quarterback play, which, could really impact the ratings down the road. I don't know how you fix it. Josh Johnson hasn't played in a game yet. He's a guy that you think of, well, at least a little bit of action in the National Football League. And you just hope to see some good play. Cardell Jones has played all right. He's played well, certainly for the level of the XFL. But what you'd like to see is just somebody with that strong arm flinging the ball down the field, making the throws. And that's the one thing that really has been lacking over the last week and a half that we've seen in the XFL. And for those that have chosen to watch it, is that quarterback with just the ability to throw the ball where he needs to. Now you can say, hey, if a quarterback could do that, then they should be able to play in the National Football League. And it just shows the weakness in the position as it exists, because it's hard to find great quarterbacks. It's hard to find good quarterbacks. It's hard to find starting NFL quarterbacks. So you're pushing this out and probably making sure all 32 teams have a backup. And then you want to go out there and find 8 more quarterbacks to play in what hopefully down the road becomes the NFL's developmental league. It's hard to do. But I tell you, you're seeing the patience kind of run out when it comes to a lot of these quarterbacks that are out there. Some of them I haven't heard of. And I don't mind watching them. I don't mind somebody getting a chance. I don't mind that, quarterback from a junior college getting a chance to play. Well, let's see how he can do. The strong arms are probably in the NFL. And this may be the pick of the litter of what is left. And, there may not be enough talent. But one of the things that could help propel the XFL and be what I hope it could be, and like I said, that's a league that will develop some players that down the road could be playing in the National Football League. They got to get some better play out of their quarterbacks. And they may just need to get better quarterbacks. And hopefully there are some quarterbacks that are down in college now that say, hey, maybe I can play in the NFL. I can be maybe drafted in the 7th round of the National Football League and have no chance of making a roster. Or maybe I could stay out of the draft and go play in the XFL and just get a little experience and get a little attention and have teams watch me and say, hey, this guy is pretty good. And I would think from backup and third-string quarterbacks in the National Football League, it probably would make some sense for the fans, but most importantly, the teams of the National Football League to watch these guys play. Because these third-string quarterbacks that are holding a clipboard on National Football League sidelines, we have no idea if they can play. We assume that they can't play. That's why they're not playing. But if you can actually see them in live game action, I have a little better understanding of what Cardell Jones is about. I have a little better understanding what Landry Jones is as a quarterback. I understand a little bit more about Matt McGloin. Hopefully, Matt McGloin's performance the other day was the worst you're ever going to see, and you're never going to see play like that again. But at least you get a chance when you see these guys with their helmets off holding a clipboard for a National Football League team. You have a little visual of what they're about on the football field. Spent a little time talking about the Daytona 500, the 62nd annual Daytona 500, how it stands out from other sports. It really is the Super Bowl or the World Series or the NBA Finals or the Stanley Cup or the National Championship of NASCAR, and it kicks the season off. You think of the likes of Jimmie Johnson and Dennt Hamlin trying to go out there and win the race for the 3rd time. There's only been 7 drivers that have won it 2 times. 3 drivers that have won it 3 times. Cal Yarborough's won it 4 times. Richard Petty's won it 7 times. And obviously the field, which includes Martin Truex and the Busch brothers and Joey Logano. We'll see what happens. An event that you kind of want to watch. Baseball Hall of Fame, we broke down every player that has been elected in the Baseball's Hall of Fame on the first year of their ballot. And the amount of voters that didn't vote for him. And I actually think this is a good thing to put up on the site, which we'll do that. We'll put this up on johnpielli.com, and I'll order it from the least amount of votes to the most amount of votes that were missing for somebody that got in on the first year of their eligibility. So it's something to be interesting to look at. This is the concluding point of the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey, by Two Ways, One Passion Food Truck located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and of course by johnpielli.com. Hope everybody enjoys the All-Star Game in the National Basketball Association. Should be fun. Like I said, the Daytona 500. You got the NHL hockey season kind of hitting its secondary stretch. Pitchers and catchers have reported Major League Baseball spring training. You got the XFL. It's surviving week number 2. And I really feel, and this is my opinion, and I could be proven wrong, that the XFL could very well last. Not just the full season, but maybe a couple seasons. We'll see how it ends up working out. I mean, you need fans to show up there. You need ratings on the television. There's a lot of money that's invested in the startup of a football league. And it's understood that there's going to be some money that's going to be lost over a couple seasons. The question is going to be, how much money can this league afford to lose? Remember, you got to pay the players. Remember, I know the networks are paying money, but the networks are not going to be as interested, ABC and Fox and ESPN, if the games aren't doing the ratings. Now, so far, a week and a half, we'll see how the ratings turn out for week number 2, but it looks like there's been enough of a turnout. What I think will happen over time is that fans will become a little bit tired of football. And unless there's something riveting in regards to the competition, unless there's a secondary storyline that's worth following, you're going to see fans kind of fade away from it. But fans want to see football. The diehard football fan is going to watch the XFL because they want to watch football. Then, the smart fan will understand that the competition is not going to be at the same level, but they're willing to give it a chance. But the one thing that has to change, and I think this is the most important thing, if you're talking about the success or the failure of the XFL down the road, it's going to have to be better play out of its quarterbacks. And I don't know if there is enough talent amongst the quarterback position for these 8 teams that they could change that. Maybe there's some quarterbacks that, like I said, some junior college guys, some former NFL quarterbacks, maybe sitting behind, on a depth chart of somebody, is a free agent now, wants to showcase themselves. But I have yet to see that quarterback that I say, wow, that guy's got an arm. He can make most of the throws. So that's my one negative. We haven't seen the play at the quarterback position, but listen, it's very hard to do in the NFL. It's something that may not change. We'll be back with you during the week. Like I said, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your Daytona 500, the NBA All-Star Game, XFL action, and anything going on in baseball. It's nice to know that we just completed a show. We didn't talk about the Houston Astros and cheating. No, I don't want to rant about this before the show ends. I want to stay away from it, at least in this show. But we'll be back with you, like I said, next week. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.